Welcome back. MTG Joe here. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the weekly metagame breakdown for the historic best of three format. We haven't really covered it too much. There was an alchemy release, so this is probably like the first deeper dive in the last 2-ish weeks. But we wanted to kind of get some data. I first want to start off with saying thank you all. We hit the 15,000 sub goal on YouTube. As with all things, we're going to try to keep growing the channel, keep exploring new options in terms of content for metagame, tutorials, stuff like that. We do have a new goal, trying to hit 20,000 by the end of the year. A little optimistic. We only have 2 months, but we'll see what happens. But just want to thank everyone for the continued support there. So we're getting the data from Untapped.gg, what you see on the screen. A companion tool that tracks your win rates along with other users, gives us a whole bunch of cool stats. Link for Untapped is in the video description. I'll paste all these deck lists as well. Now, normally we would cover the metagame breakdown, but not a huge amount of games played right now, and it's basically a Boros world that it's showing, so not really informative. So we're going to kind of skip this over this week and just kind of jump into the deck lists themselves. So October 15th through to 30th, we did 2 weeks, 10,000 games. We only did a 15-game count. So I wanted to try to see more about highlighting potential new decks, stuff like that. Historic is a format where some folks are very skilled with particular decks, and it's not unusual to see people, go on crazy win rates. I've done it. A lot of other folks have done it too. So you'll see some decks that have quite high win rates, like you'll see here, 96%, but it's a smaller sample size. Focus less on necessarily the exact win rate. It's more just the grouping. And this is just kind of showing the viable decks that can be played and mastered as we go along and seeing what kind of potential tech and stuff folks are adding to the decks. So first deck up is the 4-color Sam combo, 96%. So this is built around Birthing Ritual as the engine. You sacrifice creatures and then kind of Birthing Pod into other creatures. There's a number of infinite loop combos. So Samwise and Cat are the kind of combo. If you have these two out with a food token and some sort of sack outlet, whether Goblin Bombardment or Bartholomew, you're able to sack the cat and then bring it back with the food token, which generates a food token, and then sack the cat and then loop and then drain or ping your opponent out to death. Trapfinder and Unlucky Witness are early sack fodder that provide card advantage, help you dig deeper. The Amped Raptor cascades you down into other cards in the deck, and then a Johnny with the various sack outlets can flip and then start pinging your opponent that way there. So you have like a fair game plan that your opponent then also always has to kind of respect the combo element out of your deck. In that sense, very kind of greedy mana base, obviously, because you're playing 4 colors. Flourish Companion, Artifact Enchantment Hate with Haywire Might, Fragment Reality can be removal, and then also flexible to hit artifacts enchantments. Stone of Erich for Sacrifice Mirrors, causes them to get exiled, so voids the death trigger. And then we have Remorseful Cleric. It's a creature that can be used as Graveyard Hate, that's tutorable. And an interesting Divine Purge out of the side. I guess for the kind of the go wide decks, you can sack your stuff. Kind of interesting though, because it hits all your stuff. That's an interesting inclusion. I'd be very interested to see why they're playing that card in there. Next up is Boros Auras, probably the most popular deck, I would say. Seeing a lot of it. It's a very strong deck. So Auras has been around since the inception of Historic. At times it's been the best deck. More recent than that, it's been unplayable. But we got 2 new cards in Sheltered by Ghost and Shard Mage Rescue. So Sheltered by Ghost is just an insane card. It's removal for 2 mana that also adds Ward 2 and gives a power boost and gives lifelink. Playing it on something like Light Pause then lets you tutor. If you play one of your other enchantments, something like Demonic Ruckus or All That Glitters, you can tutor for the Sheltered by Ghost. So it's tutorable removal with added protection added on. Really nice with any of these big creatures, helps you race because you can just make like a huge lifelinker with like Vigilance or Flying and just kind of beat that way there. Shard Mage Rescue as a protection effect, that is also an enchantment that triggers the whole process. Demonic Ruckus is a really nice curve because you can plot it on 1. On turn 2, you could play Light Pause and then immediately cast it and get Sheltered by Ghost or any of the other effects. The deck's got Ethereal Armor to boost the power, Griff Spoon, Hammerhand, so Flying, Haste, Vigilance, all mixed into there. I think instead of the All That Glitters, I'd probably prefer the other Ethereal Armor. It's just cheaper. You want to kind of get more churn through your deck, but it's up to you on that. Esper Sentinel, and then for kind of the tax effect, gets you some card advantage, and then Giver of Runes for protection. Now, notably, when you're dealing with protection, especially in the mirror, if you give pro white, all your auras will fall off your creature. So be mindful of that. One trick that you can do in some of these matchups, you're going to be inclined to hit at times your opponent's creatures in the same way. And if they have Giver of Runes or Shard Mage Rescue, you usually want to hit the Giver first for the protection. But you can also just target their auras. So you can kind of shrink down their creature because it kind of opens you up to getting blown out sometimes. So that's something to just consider when you're playing out your cards. Next deck up is Mardu Sacrifice. Again, very high win rate. The big kind of tech that we're seeing is Clockwork Percussionist coming in instead of the Unlucky Witness. This lets you play until the end of your next turn, so just a longer period to kind of cast your spells. It's also a haste threat, so it could come down and attack right away. So you get that value there. Corrupted Conviction is just the Village Rites style effect. Miner can repeatedly come back per black mana with the Goblin Bombardment, so ping effects. Deck's all about kind of sacrificing your creatures for value, drawing cards, and then you can drain them out with like Marionette Apprentice, Goblin Bombardment. You can get loops back with the Miner. So you're seeing some like fragments in the main as well. Notably no Fatal Push, instead playing Fragment Reality. Fragment, Prismatic Ending, just cheaper removal options. Stone of Erich again for the sacrifice mirrors. Surgical for an edict, or like a Graveyard Hate, but also just steal cards out of your opponent's library. Thoughtseize, Juggernaut is Hand Hate. Graven Charm, very flexible card. Graveyard Hate, Removal, and Enchantment Hate. And then Omnixless, you'd have to borrow it out of Luris, but for the control matchups, anything with Divine Purge, stuff like that, you can bring in Omnixless. Selesnya Devotion, really mono green Devotion with Elesh Norn. This is the Nykthos deck. Generates huge amounts of mana. Early ramp effects with Bird's Paradise, Delighted Halfling, Utopia Sprawl, Kiora taps and taps. Kiora and Outcaster Trailblazer are your card draw engine. You play big creatures, you get a whole bunch of value. Goal of the deck is to cast like Storm the Festivals to hit a bunch of big stuff. With Kiora, you can untap the Nykthos, basically storm through your deck. Karn gives you access to a Karn board, so no sideboard, but situational artifacts that can be tutored on demand. The big kind of combo, if you would, is kind of build out a huge board with Karn, get a Chroma's Memorial, all your creatures get haste and vigilance, so you can kill them that turn. You also have Karn to get Mindslaver to just take control of your opponent's turn and just ruin their day and kind of go from there. Graveyard Hate, Artifact Enchantment Hate, Activated Ability Hate, cheap removal, blow up their lands or turn off activated abilities. Combo Hate, Sweeper, One Ring for card advantage, Phyrexian Metamorph to copy something. Sky Sovereign is cheap removal, or like as removal. Worm Coil for aggressive decks gains you some life back. Cityscape Leveler, general catch-all blow up stuff, and then Portal to Phyrexia. Very good against like the Auras deck stuff. That just force the edict out of them. Moving on, we got a Esper Sorin Impervious Bloodlord deck. I like the name of this, very to the point. This is kind of really Dimir Sorin kind of package. So you have Sorin into Saint Elenda as well as Vein Ripper. Overlord helps you dig into your combo pieces as relevant. Bloodghast could come back. There's also the Sorin Bloodghast combo. You can sacrifice because it's a vampire to Lightning Helix any target, and then when a line comes back, it kind of recurs in that sense. So we got the Frog kind of Dimir package, Nethergoyf, a bunch of cheap counters in here, some removal options. Baleful Strix can kind of trade up, give you some card advantage as well. It's an artifact for the Nethergoyf. Lorien Revealed helps you hit land drops, Treasure Cruise. The one of Snapcaster is kind of interesting. There's not a huge amount of, I guess there's some number of instances of sorceries, but some happen to be your lands as well. Probably just play more interaction. This doesn't really seem like a Snapcaster deck necessarily. More cheap removal and cut down, Pithing Needle for activated abilities, bunch of cheap counters as relevant. Surgical, again, Graveyard Hate, stuff like that. Sweeper and Toxic Deluge, and Leyline of the Void as a Graveyard Hate piece. Jeskai Control. So this is the Strict Proctor control deck, Lotus Field. So what you're trying to do is have Proctor out, play Lotus Field, the trigger gets fizzled, so you could just get Lotus Field for full value. You could also on turn 2 with 1 blue mana up in full control mode, play Lotus Field, stifle the trigger, so you get it that way there. With Strict Proctor out, Null Drifters, Evoke trigger doesn't happen, so you just get a 3 mana draw 2 4/4 Annihilator. Blage doesn't get sacrificed, so it's kind of value there. Otherwise, it's just a Jeskai control deck, seeing stuff like temporary lockdown to deal with the Auras decks and stuff like that. One ring, all those shenanigans. Again, activated abilities, sack effects. We're going to cover this. Cheap counters. Tajik comes into like the control mirrors. Heavy removal mirrors, just a really hard to deal with threat. And then Farewell is a catch-all sweeper. Wizards, nothing too innovative this week with Wizards. 82%, some shove-asides in the main. Sleight of hand. I prefer the instant speed card draw. The one with Surveil Opt, or just because you can kind of be tricky in terms of your combat, not knowing how much. You have Dreadhorde in here, Balmor, some interesting numbers here, not the full set. Full set of Slick Shot, Expressive Iteration mixed into here. There's some that were trying the ley line being like all in. This one's probably a little bit more consistent. Into the Flood Maw is really good against the Auras decks, kind of reset them. Activated abilities, cheap counters, stones, surgicals, Aether Gust. You may want, like, some of the decks will play Snapcaster sometimes, just as some additional value post board. That's something to consider there. You can also play some Brotherhood's End if you want to sweeper against the go wide decks. There's Pyroclasm. You can play that as well if you're worried about the Auras decks or the go wide decks. That's another thing to kind of consider. Your creatures all survive Pyroclasm. Then we got a return of ninjas. So non-Luris, because you want to play Kaido, Bane of Nightmares, you can ninjutsu it in. It's an anthem for your other ninjas, gets you a whole bunch of value. So you're playing kind of that tempo-oriented. Some of them were trying out Mockingbird. Some have been playing Ingenious Prodigy just because it's got the Skulk ability, hard to kind of get blocked, so you get that value. Unblockable. So basically, this is kind of a tempo-oriented deck. You're going to have cheap evasive creatures. Attack with them. Your opponent's not going to block. Then you get to activate ninjutsu. This one draws you cards. This one's a lord. This one draws you cards. There is kind of a, if you have enough mana, this gets reduced enough to 1 mana. If you have like silver furs, you can start copying the silver furs, return it back to hand, and then just create a bunch of tokens. Search up ninjas. There's a video on my YouTube from like a while back, but the first game we show off how that combo works. You can kind of see there. You also have Retrofitter along with Ornithopter to get that value. Make just big tokens. Again, a lot of the same combo or sideboard pieces. Meat Hook for the go wide decks. Edict's really good against the Auras decks. Thoughtseize for hand hate kind of mixed in. Then we go to Orzhov Vampires. So Sorin package, Saint Elenda in here. But this one's got some cool stuff. You got Overlord of the Mistmoors and Overlord of the Balemark, help you dig. Then you also have dedicated Dollmaker, so you cast this for the impending cost, and then you Dollmaker the Overlords, and then it comes back as a token copy, but it comes out as a creature, so you get the immediate value, so you can attack in, which is kind of a cool curve. Hand hate, so it's kind of a mid-rangey shell, like Reprieve for value, bunch of cheap removal, Esper Sentinel for tax, get lost in here until you can find your combo. Again, Esper Sentinel for the heavy, like, spell-based decks, just kind of advantage. Even control decks, it's just a threat that they got to answer. It's not going to close out the game quickly. It helps you dig for a lot of card advantage. Graveyard hate, activated ability, graveyard combo hate, hand hate, sweepers, kind of mixed in for the go wide decks. Boros Energy, 76%. So Luris Companion. I really don't like Aether Hub in the non-Jingantha version. It just messes with your mana consistency. I would just play regular, like duels. There's enough in the format, pathways, whatever it may be. So a lot of the cards got nerfed here. Discharge Guide, Oscillus Pride, but the deck's still quite powerful. Opting to play Path of Exile here. Static Prison is kind of the package. Stone of Arachmain, which is kind of interesting. Some Giver of Runes as protection effects. But you're going back to the Unstable Amulet. The deck's basically, the engine is Johnny is just a busted card. You play it with Bombardment, it's going to run away with a lot of games. Deafening Silence against any heavy spell-based deck. Fragment is cheap removal. Jolted Awake against heavy removal. You could just kind of bring back stuff. Rending Volley for blue or white stuff. Really good against like the Auras. Notably can't be countered, so you can get around ward effects. Invasion for hand hate, and then Sun Cleanser. We then go to Esper Diviner. So this is a cool one. So it's a reanimate kind of style deck. So Diviner of Fate, when you enters battlefield, connives. If you're to discard a card once per turn, you get to basically seek a card from your library that shares the same type. So you discard a creature, you get a creature to hand. So you never kind of lose that value. You get card filtering. but you still kind of get value. It also works with Psychic Frog, where on demand you could just discard a card each turn cycle and then get that value. What you're trying to do with this deck is discard either Adhorant Oculus, ideally, or the new card Razor Demon, 3 mana 7/7 ward. Opponent has to discard a card, and then bring it back with either Unearth or Helping Hand. So you get that value there. Bone Shards could be a discard outlet that's removal, Fragments, and then Stitcher helps you mill over as well. And we have another, it's basically kind of collected company in white. So you look at the top 6, you put a creature with mana value 3 or less onto the battlefield, and then you conjure a duplicate. So basically, you're kind of making an offspring token of that creature with base power, toughness 1. So you can get 2 Oculus, 2 Diviner, 2 Psychic Frogs, whatever it may be. Sideboard's really clean. Removal, graveyard hate, hand hate for the heavy kind of disc when you need a lot of discard. Then we have Rakdos Sorin. So Sorin's been really popular right now. So kind of similar idea. You have the Sorin Vein Ripper. You could probably get away with playing some Saint Alendas. The card's insane. But Fear of Missing Out for extra combat steps. Fable, you have the Razor Demon. This one's playing Persist and Unearth to get back the combo pieces. Persist can get Vein Ripper back. It cannot get Saint Alenda, but it can also get back Troll. Otherwise, it's just like a Rakdos mid-range deck. Impetuous Lootmonger is another effect that can draw discard to help you dig into your various graveyard pieces. Hand hate, graveyard hate, activated abilities, Pyroclasm, Toxic Deluge for kind of the go wide decks, and Lily for the grindy match. And lastly, this one's kind of cool too. So Golgari, it's actually kind of a combo graveyard focus. So you're self-milling, Patchwork Beastie, Stitcher, Bloodghast in here, Malavin Rumble, Say Its Name is kind of the fill your graveyard style effects. Say Its Name, Altenac. You have Overlord in here. White of the Reliquary can get you lands. Sacrificing creatures kind of get value. But what you're trying to do is have Enduring Tenacity out. And then you use Gnaw to the Bone from either your hand or graveyard. If you self-mill it, you gain 2 life for each creature card in your graveyard. Whenever you gain life, opponent loses that much life, and then you kind of just mill them out that, or you burn them out that way there, which is kind of sweet. Shifting Woodlands is kind of a animate effect, so you can animate like the Tenacity if you have enough lands. Artifact Enchantment Hate, notably for graveyard stuff. Cling to Dust, Assassin's Trophy as catch-all removal, Dampening Sphere for like Nykthos deck, Path to Peril, Culling Ritual as sweepers. So that's it for the week. Let me know what you've been playing, what you've been liking, and we'll catch you next time.